Thanks. I'd rather not have to yell. So, first of all, thank you everybody for coming down and participating in a town hall event. The reason that I'd called this tonight is that I am one of the administrators on Dynamic Douglas. I've seen a lot of heated debate back and forth going on between neighbors. I've seen some less than stellar behavior of my fellow citizens that are on there. I've seen some information being spread back and forth that some of it's just not factual. So I felt that it was kind of my responsibility as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen to sit down and give the residents an opportunity to have an open Q&A with us, ask any questions that you have regarding concerns. I know that the intricacies of municipal finance is a lot like reading Japanese stereo instructions backwards, and like herding cats is about the easiest way to look at it. I wanted to at least start this off with an understanding, I guess, and I can see where some of the folks that are opting to vote no and some of the theories that they have are coming from. So 5 years ago, my better half and I moved back to Douglas from the booming metropolis of Mason, New Hampshire, population 1,200. So to where the folks that live on Perry Street, the unpaved part, I feel your pain because we lived on the only paved road and I ruined a perfectly good Mercedes living there. So when we did move back to town, I walked back to Douglas. Well, we moved back to Douglas in the heat of a collective bargaining negotiation that was making itself more and more public daily, and on the heels of a Proposition 2.5 override proposal that was being put forth by the school district. I believe was the first one in, yeah, 2013. So I came in with a 3x3 picture of understanding what was going on in the town budget and decided to just look at overall revenue and looked at the total revenue dollars and thought to myself in my simple little Irish mind, there's no way they can't make that work with the money they're bringing in. So I proceeded to rant and rave and yell and scream at the newspaper and carry on like a 14-carat jerk, and decided I knew everything and watched social media and said, well, this just isn't a fact, this is wrong. And Tina, being much brighter and more insightful than I am, did some research, discovered there was an opening on the Board of Selectmen, and gave me an alternative of, you can either shut your mouth or you can run for office and do something about it. So my Irish got up and said, I'll show her, thinking I'll never get elected, and lo and behold, here I am, 5 years later, sitting on the Board of Selectmen. But the difference that you have sitting in this seat than sitting out as a resident of the town is we have a wonderful finance director that has an ideology of every dollar has a story, and every new selectman is going to learn that story, and they're going to make sure that they're preaching it properly. Since being elected, going through and looking at revenues and actual costs and seeing the way that the town's run, one of my coins in 5 years ago when I ran was fiscal irresponsibility, and I regret ever having those words come out of my mouth, because I've witnessed firsthand that this town definitely does understand the value of every dollar, and every dollar does have a story, and every dollar is an important one that's to be spent. So multiple budget cycles later, here we sit in front of you yet again, but the situation, as has been warned on multiple overrides attempts, has begun to get significantly more dire. One of the first things that I did at least want to address with one of the big misconceptions that's happening is that our local government has got a lot of fat in it, and that we haven't made enough cuts in order to sustain the revenue. So I just want to go over from FY 2007 to FY 2018 some of the things that have been done, and I've referred to it in these meetings as the Douglas has suffered the death of 1,000 cuts. In 2007, there was the reduction of the senior clerk position in the Council on Aging. 2 years later, we reduced 1 FTE from the Selectmen's office. In FY 2010, the elimination of the shared clerk's position in the assessor-collector area, elimination of summer part-time positions at the highway, and expense budget reduction, total cut of $72,000. Police and fire unions graciously reopened their contracts, reduced their COLA from 3% to 1.5%, and accepted step freezes and expense budget cuts, and the police changes alone saved $95,389 for that year. Step freezes for all non-union municipal employees were put into place in FY 2010. 2011, step freeze for all non-union municipal employees continues, and a further $7,500 cut to highway debt expenses and absorption of recreational field maintenance duties. So they got less budget money and took on more work. In fiscal year 2012, the postponement of the police cruiser replacement, the cut of one full-time worker position from the highway department, and the reduction in the recreation budget of $8,000. We go to 2013, reduction of conservation agent from full-time to part-time, discount of senior van services, discontinuation of senior van services, postponement of the police cruiser replacement yet again, which was now a safety issue for the police department, and an additional $13,500 cut from the highway budget and $10,000 cut from recreation. So these same groups of individuals are still doing the same level of work with less money and not complaining. 2014, the Council on Aging Director departed from Douglas, was not replaced, and merged with an outreach coordinator. Reduction of the Board of Health Administrative Support Supervisor went from 30 hours to 19 hours per week. There was another step freeze for all non-union municipal employees, the elimination of a secretary position at the police department, and the lieutenant took over those duties. And I think you still doing those, Chief?
Yes.
So the reduction of a facilities manager full-time position to part-time custodian, and the other duties were picked up by our highway department. The health insurance plan changes, single provider deductible plan with HRA, and the creation of an optional waiver program. We moved to 2015, the reduction of the building inspector's hours from a full to a part-time position. 2017, new library director does not take step increase, and we move to a high deductible health insurance plan. Which brings us to fiscal year 2018, where we sit, where the library used resolving funds to meet the MAR contribution retirement, and there was another step freeze proposed for all non-union municipal workers. These are all subtle, quiet cuts that took place in the background without the general residents paying attention or understanding that it really happened, because our department heads have a dedication to this town like I haven't seen anywhere. Because everybody that sits at these tables in elected positions or appointed positions has a dedication to provide the best level of service to this community that we can possibly offer. So the first rumor that I saw out there to where cuts haven't been made and people haven't seen them, figured I'd at least put them out in front of you guys in black and white. So the problem that Douglas has, it isn't a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts or ways that you can slice it. Our tax levy and the current revenue that's coming in off of the tax levy is not able to sustain the level of service that we're currently providing to our town. So the only solutions that we have that are viable are we raise the tax levy or we decrease the amount of services that are offered. Last year, when we went through our budget cycles, Douglas has been doing the utilization of free cash in its operational budget, which has managed to get us through a lot of tight spots, but the dependency on free cash has increased year after year. Would you tend to agree with that, Gene? In a healthy fiscal model for a municipality, free cash is utilized for capital expenditure, not utilized for operational budget. And the easiest way to get your head around free cash, and I struggled with it myself, is some people look at it as a savings account, and that's not really the way you should look at it. Is anybody in the audience a bonused employee where they work? Get sales bonuses? So do you count on your sales bonus to drive your day-to-day expenses in your household? So if you did, you're kind of asking for trouble. When your bonuses come in, chances are you end up doing an improvement around the house, a repair on the car that you'd wanted to do, because in essence it's extra money. And I'm sorry, Gene, I know you don't like that term, and I don't want to lecture about it again. That's what we've been doing with free cash. You can't count on that. A lot of free cash comes in via turnback. So because we've conservatively budgeted various departments, or they've managed to operate their department with a little bit of money left over, so it gets turned back into free cash. It comes in via an insurance claim. Like if we had something that was damaging to a building, we've already outlaid that capital to repair it. The insurance money is then a reimbursement. But because of the way things work, it has to go into free cash. But the more you utilize your free cash, the less likely, or the tighter your budget gets, the less likely that free cash number is ever going to grow. And we've been fortunate, I guess is the easiest way to explain it, that we've been able to use that amount of free cash and move our budget forward and present to DOR a balanced budget, which we're required by law to do. At the end of every year, a balanced budget has to go to DOR, get certified. They say, yes, you can operate another year. Good for you. How many of you watched the Selectmen's meeting when we started going over the 5-year budget model? It's our usual viewing audience, like 7, 8. We're pretty good at that. What we've done in the past prior to Mr. Wojcik coming was we usually did our budgets year to year. We're going to get through next year and manage to get through next year, and we'll worry about FY20 when we come to FY20 or start the budget season for it. Matt brought us into a 5-year budgeting model. And what a 5-year budgeting model does is it exposes to you weaknesses in revenues or expenses, and it does it relatively quickly. And what stood out to us was, we good over there, guys? Do we have an AV issue? What the 5-year budget model exposed to us is that on our current trend and our current expense versus revenue rate, in 2021, there's no feasible means for us to present to DOR a balanced budget. So I did make a slight, I didn't paint the full picture because somebody had asked regarding receivership and what does it mean to a town and how does that work, and I did look into chapter 44 section 2, which covers, what was that called? The chapter 44. Qualified bonds, which is part of the picture but not all of it. Other towns that did go into a receivership, special legislation was actually passed where they actually appointed a receiver to aid the town in getting itself right-sized. Most of the towns that have gone into receivership are 2 to 3 times the size of Douglas. Some of them had massive amounts of debts that they'd managed to accrue. I don't think we have huge debt, at least not to my understanding. It's debt excluded. We would be the first town of our size and stature to actually end up in that position. So for them to actually look at the qualified rating, and what really starts to send the alarm bells off is when we're unable to present a balanced budget to DOR. That's when we start getting looked at. Some people have asked the question of what does receivership really mean? Is it actually a good thing? Because maybe the state can come in and straighten all of these things out. I can't answer that honestly, but my opinion is that any time that you get the state involved to try and fix a problem, it tends to make it exponentially worse before it gets better. I prefer to see control of the town and the community sit within its residents. I would prefer to see our legislative body continue to be town meeting. I would like to see our budgeting process gone through our finance committees and the Board of Selectmen, because we still have control over our community. And I think at the end of the day, that's what people want to do. You don't want to sit at town meeting and not have a voice. So I've quoted it a few times on Facebook that the purest form of democracy that you're ever going to see is town meeting. It's where you show up and you vote and it counts and people listen because we have to. It's not like a national election to where we have people that represent our best interests at heart. So my purpose tonight is not to persuade people that are saying no to vote yes, or people that are voting yes to vote no. It was, I'm watching a community that I care about, that I'm elected to represent and steer in leadership, tearing each other apart over a difference of opinion. That's something that's very personal to each and every one of you. Your personal household finances are your business. What you can afford and can't afford is up for you folks to all decide. You know, I've seen people recommending, saying, You know, don't buy a cup of coffee, don't do this, don't do that, and it's really not our business, and it's not our place to be telling people how to manage their personal finance. You have a decision to make. It should be an educated decision. If you're looking at something that potentially is increasing your taxes that could put a little bit of a tightness on your budget, you should probably understand why, and you should probably understand what it means to you. But that's about all I can really go off on my little speech and tangent. It's more about hearing from you guys as to what questions you have, how can we help answer them. I don't have all of the answers, and I've surrounded myself with as many people as I can that can get them for you. So the only thing that I ask is that we be respectful of one another. When you have a question, let the person ask it. When we give an answer to the question, allow us the opportunity to answer it, and don't make any judgments on any of these people, because at the end of the day, these are your neighbors. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
You did a fine job.
Anybody have any questions, or you guys just want to look and admire my fancy tie?
I'll start it off.
All right.
Brett Argel, 3 Royal Crest Drive. Can you outline the scenario that would trigger receivership? Because in my mind, part of me thinks that, and I'm not suggesting to anybody that works in town, that just keep cutting services, and eventually end up with 2 firemen and 3 police officers, and a part-time clerk that works 1 day a week and whatnot. So can you maybe go over what 2021 means?
Sure. So when it comes to the public services part, right now, Nick, keep me honest on this. We have 2 police officers on the road.
Correct.
Per shift.
Right.
For a population of 8,600 people in a town that's relatively diverse mileage-wise.
Right.
And I would probably dare to venture, and I don't know all the statistics on it, I'd lean on Nick, that's about as small as we can get regarding a crew of police officers on at any given shift without being deemed unsafe. So it's not a decision that we could make in good conscience or public safety-wise. As far as laws are concerned, we're required to pay our debts. We're required by law to pay into the pension. Is that right, Gene? We're required by law to fund the school district. And what else? Health insurance. We're required by law to pay into health insurance. So when we get to a point where we can no longer contribute to or pay any one of those 3 services, I think that would be the beginnings of where we move to DOR and we start the process of receivership, because we're not meeting our legal obligations to fund departments. So, not good, quite bad, and really bad. None of us want to go to really bad. So I hadn't had the opportunity to see that.
Typically, receivership is triggered by the inability of a municipality to balance its budget over a series of years that runs what's called a structural deficit. You owe more money than you take in, and year to year you try to balance your budget, or you use one-time revenues to plug the hole. You arrive at a point where that ratio gets so high, you simply can't rob Peter anymore to pay Paul. So in the case of Chelsea, because they didn't have debt and they weren't worried about debt, it was 20–25% of their operating budget. They didn't raise the revenue to cover. But in Springfield, it was about 7.5%. So they were at about a $41 million structural deficit on a budget that was about $541 million. So your warning signs are when you're using unreliable sources of revenue over a long period of time to cover expenses that you know will come up every single year or maybe growing every single year. Because at that point, you don't have the resources to see ahead to the future and be able to balance the check. Another indicator, as most people would recognize, is an ongoing pattern of going out for debt and having the rating agencies keep coming back and saying you have so little budget flexibility, we're going to continually downgrade your bond rating. So a lot of communities, this was especially true with the two Rhode Island communities, Central Falls and Socket, they achieved junk bond status. And once that occurred, the state had no choice but to be able to come in and protect basically its bond instruments and support those cities. In Massachusetts, you really haven't had anybody reach that status yet. The state has acted a little bit more quickly. But those are two primary indicators. There's a third one, which is almost as concerning because Douglas is a little bit different example. But if you were to see your school department deteriorate to the point where it can no longer perform, the state would look at the school department for purposes of receivership and would gather the resources from the rest of the town to support the school department. The state will step in and do that, and has done so on 3 occasions. Lawrence, Holyoke, and Southbridge.
Does that answer your question, Brett?
Thank you.
I believe the gentleman with the glasses, you had a...
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could describe the process of the state purchasing land and then assessing it, and then how the reimbursement works, because it seems like that's a huge portion of the town is state-owned, and so there's not a solid revenue source if they can just decide what they want to reimburse.
The pilot program.
I don't know what you call it.
That's what it, payment in lieu of taxes.
For the state land?
Yep, they run through what they call pilot.
Yeah, I mean, on the state website, they call it a cherry sheet of some sort?
Yep. It's a piece of it. The state's purchasing of the land is done through private, most of it's been through private landowner that have opted to sell off to DCR, which is the state's Department of Recreation and Conservation, DCR. So the pilot fund, Gene, do you have the pilot funding? I know that's the trending that's been happening on that.
230,000, somewhere in that area. 270.
So I really can't explain the funding model behind it or how they prove the value on it. But what I can say is that
They assess it and they provide that to them?
no, that's
They assess the land, and then they decide what rate they're going to reimburse us.
pretty much it.
If we were to assess it, we would think we looked 1.5 million. It would be, but it's a fraction. The pilot monies that we get is the 10% of that.
Yeah, I think 160,000.
Yeah. Basically, the state legislature sets the size of the pie, and then everybody else tries to get a piece of the pie, and the pie is it's more like a little tabletop junior pie to begin with. And we should get because I don't think any other communities have 25% of the town owned by the state.
The current
Maybe there's a couple of smaller towns in the Berkshires that are in the situation. So we're fighting for a small, with a very small pie, and
the current formula seems to favor watershed. Like they seem to get the biggest piece of the small little tabletop pie that Hal's talking about. And I think the part that was the most outrageous to us, and we did reach out to our state senator and our state rep about it, was the fact that they acquired additional land and the pilot payment decreased. So they actually have more space and more land, but they give us less money.
Is there any say in a town to restrict them purchasing more land? Because if they continue to buy land, then that number is going to go down and down. Because where we're generating revenue now, you wouldn't have any more. Or
So
a small pie.
we can prevent them from buying land that the town owns. So we can just say, well, no, we're not going to sell it to you, and that's that. But what they tend to do is reach out to private landowners to where we can apply some political pressure to them, ask them that we'd prefer that they not engage into expanding upon the state forest. But at the end of the day, if the landowner says, yeah, I'll sell you my 21 acres for $1 million DCR, then they'll sell it. We really don't have any authority over a private landowner unless there's a tax lien or something like that on it where we could intervene.
That did change a little bit with the new administration. I will say the former administrations were very aggressive in trying to purchase land. Now they've purchased enough, so maybe there's not as much to buy. However, the administration now will, because of our state rep and state senator and us squawking about DCR and the operation, they will look to us to see if it's something that we would support as a town. And we're on record a couple times of saying that that's not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And we have worked with a consultant trying to explain to the state how the formula is not working well with Douglas to try to increase our share of that very small pie. So we certainly have thought that's an avenue we should pursue. And we've been trying to get some extra money because of running Wallem Lake and demands that makes on fire and the police department. So that's an ongoing discussion we have with the state.
Oh, I thought it was a question. So, and I will go on record saying our Selectman Bonin offered to stand in his underwear in the state forest and protest at one point. So, so do we have any other questions?
I have a question. I'll use the microphone.
Absolutely.
Tom Devlin, 417 Northeast Maine. We talked about business and industry coming into the town. My question is the TIF program, the tax incremental financing. Does that pit town against town trying to get businesses into a town? And does it basically, you have to give up revenue for like 5 or 10 years in order to get a business into the town?
I'm going to let you take a stab at that one, Hal.
That's actually something I do work in that field professionally. We've only had, I think, 3 or 4 TIFs, and in a perfect world, you wouldn't have any of these programs and everybody would be on their own, but we're not in a perfect world, so whatever fish come down the highway, we're always trying to compete and land the business into Douglas. And the concept is you're gaining more tax revenue than you're giving away. The TIFs are fairly small dollars now in the incentives. One was for the envelope company, that's the major one, and the others were some relatively small ones. But if we had a major industrial candidate to come into town, we'd probably have to get in that area. So it is a tool. I don't think it's really any drain on the town, and we've probably come out ahead by attracting a couple of businesses that may have gone elsewhere. Yeah, again, in the perfect world, no state would have these programs, but they do. And each community, unfortunately, fights the neighboring communities for property tax revenue.
Yes, ma'am.
Joanne Griffin, 151 Perry Street. When I ask people, and I have to say that I've traditionally voted no, but I've looked at all the readings and I'm really trying to come and do an intelligent vote. When I ask the people who are voting no, and I'm a psychotherapist, so forgive me for getting touchy-feely about this, they'll say, I don't trust them. That's what we get, okay. Yeah. So I don't care about speaking about for the others, but I'm going to speak for me in reading the stuff and talking, listening to Jim and other people. For me, to build my trust, I would like to know, if I voted yes, what is your thoughts for increasing revenue? I have to say that, let me just step back for a minute. As someone who for 40 years, this is another session some other time, I recognize, but as someone who for 40 years has fought substance abuse, to have the one industry that's in the town, which is a marijuana plant, I'm sorry, I have an issue with that, okay? That's a whole other session at some point. Now, I didn't know how that was coming in. I don't know how that happened. I must have been too busy to see it. But in any event, and not getting rid of the product is not going to get rid of the issue. But I just find it interesting that, other things have tried to come to town, windmills and that kind of thing. So I want to hear what is your plan for bringing industry in, and do you have anything that's been offered? And so that's what I need.
Sure. So I can address some of it, and I know part of it you don't care for the answer of the industry that's currently.
Well, it's just silly because I'm around the corner fighting it and over here we're promoting it, so that's all.
Well, understood. So it is, if you take the emotional side of it out and you look at it strictly based off of revenue dollars, so you look at, I understand there's people with hard feelings. Mr. Cortez actually was one of them that was definitely not a huge fan of medicinal or recreational marijuana, based off of his background as a retired state trooper. So I can understand and respect where you're coming from. But if you look at it and step back from a business aspect and you look at the revenue dollars that that particular industry's brought into Colorado and the various other states that it came in, it's an opportunity for quick hit revenue to hit the town. Like, because based off of the Cannabis Commission, you can grab 3% off of the gross retail sales that come in off of a recreational marijuana store. With the grow facility, we have a host agreement that's in place that's going to bring us additional revenue, I think much more. My long-term plan, if the override goes through, is what I would prefer to see is the use of Chapter 90 money, which is the state money that comes in based towards infrastructure, and the utilization of free cash that's no longer bound under an operational budget to try and get infrastructure into some of our industrial zone properties. Because I think a large deterrent for larger businesses and industry to come into town is they don't have what they call a pad-ready site, which means there's a road, there's power, there's water, there's sewer, and all they have to do is build. So I think that's something that I would explore, and I think some of the other members of the board would agree would be a wise decision for us. I'm also a large advocate of the opportunity if a power plant presents itself. I know some people find them scary, but again, it's tremendous amounts of revenue to a town that's in dire need of it. Ultimately, what I'd like to see is a more diversified tax base based off of trying to, I guess you'd probably call it, cultivate our industrial property, and trying to cut some of our dependency on state aid to where we're a little bit more self-sufficient, but it takes time. So what I'd explain when we did propose the override is it buys us 5 years, barring anything extraordinary coming through and happening. But based off of the previous 5-year trends, this override, if passed, buys us a 5-year opportunity that we can start investing into the infrastructure and start doing things that make us significantly more attractive to business coming in. But two stepping stones that are on that, one that's large and in the foreseeable future, is recreational marijuana. The one thing the whole board does agree on is we do not want it in downtown. So we need to go through zoning. We need to find ways that we can put it into the community without having it sitting there, because I don't think anybody wants to walk into the Coffee Bean and then go next door and grab some, you know, cannabis-based gummies and do whatever it is. Well, you do. Well, there is. Well, you can't make everybody happy. I guess that's the long and the short of it. But does that answer your question, or?
Not completely. I'd like to know, are there applicants actually now that you're looking at
For
industrial revenue?
Hal does a lot of that.
I actually got involved in town government in Douglas because I wanted to attract business to town. We only have 6% of our tax base is commercial or industrial. And that's basically what I've been doing in my law practice elsewhere, is working to help businesses expand and use various programs. The problem in Douglas, the basic problem, is that most of the industrial property is not in strong hands where they have the resources and the desire to develop the property. About 8-9 years ago, we had the opportunity to have a 250,000 square foot Walmart distribution facility, and we were the #1 spot in the state. We came this close, and then the property owner at the time couldn't reach an agreement, and the state couldn't put the package of infrastructure that we need, the road improvements coming off the highway in Webster and widening the lanes for trucks to come up there. That would have contributed probably $750,000 to $1 million a year to the town. We had another situation where there was an equestrian facility you may have read about in the paper that was looking, and Douglas was a top spot. Unfortunately, the property owner, who owns 600 or 700 acres, likes to walk his dogs on the property and did not want to sell the property, okay? We've had 3 or 4 instances. We had the wind farm that was going to come in, and then there was a court case which limited the state's ability to purchase environmentally friendly electricity and allowed other bidders to come in, which knocked out basically the financing for that. We've had 3 or 4 other close calls. Unfortunately, Douglas is not, within the 495 belt, but development will come here, and we're doing everything we can to speed it up, and I feel especially bad that hasn't happened yet. We've worked with the state. We've developed plans for an industrial park out on Route 16, and I guess we had the real estate recession that pushed development back. Sooner or later, particularly the Pine property, that will be developed and will become a commercially viable location, but he's still working and removing the gravel from that area. That's one of our problems. Maybe there'll be a hotel or a shopping center there someday. So, we're trying our best, and we'd love to have any ideas to bring, because certainly the town is pro-industry. I work in a lot of communities, and usually people are against it, but fortunately our commercial and industrial land is located sort of on the wings of the town and generally doesn't impact too many residents. So the town and the town meeting has always been supportive, and we've had some very close calls. Unfortunately, we haven't landed the big fish, so we're still working.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to harp on too much, and I know that we're not getting a ton of money from what's above the factory, but theoretically, could pot save the town? Like, is there enough money there to be made to pay our salaries and downs?
I don't think that there's enough to save the town.
No.
I guess it all really would depend. I think Colorado really got the explosive growth off of, no pun intended, I guess. All right, I'm cracking myself up now. And I'm really not that funny. So Colorado really got the benefit of seeing an industry take off like that. The other states that have been walking into it are what you'd call a fast follower. Do I think that there's a potential for significant revenue off of marijuana? I do. As for not making a lot of money off of the host agreement for the grow facility, in speaking with Mr. DeCaro, who actually owns and operates medical alternatives for the grow facility, I believe he'd stated we have probably the most generous host agreement in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I'm not trying to bash the agreement. We're not getting enough from the host agreement.
Expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
The host agreement was a 2-stage process. When we did the first one, it was for growth for medicinal marijuana, because the citizen initiative legalizing marijuana for recreational use had not passed yet. So 2 of the members, myself and Kevin, negotiated a contract with medicinal alternatives out of the Envelope Factory. At the time, it's my understanding that one contract was the highest host agreement anywhere in the Commonwealth. We knew that if the initiative passed, he'd be right back looking for the ability to grow recreational marijuana. Who wouldn't in his position? He came back, and we recently signed another agreement with him for additional money every year. The state they put out the draft regulations. Are the regulations final yet for sales? They're due July 1st, but I don't know if they're final.
I think they're final.
Okay. I believe they're final too, but it doesn't really matter. They've limited the town's take from the other 2 that I just talked about are cultivation, okay? Now when you get into sales, they've limited our take to 3% of the gross. That's not going to be anywhere near the host agreements that we signed for cultivation. Think even if they have $1 million a year, that's $30,000 for the town, okay? So the state has taken the ability for us to go in and negotiate and drive a hard bargain, as I feel we did with the cultivation. They've taken that ability away from us when it comes to sales.
Is there also opportunity for paraphernalia stores, restaurants, clubs, things like that? Like cigar bar for weed?
I mean, I don't know of anything that's keeping anyone from opening a cigar bar now. If they think that this is the venue for it, our town is the venue.
If you open a cigar bar, I personally will go.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
The biggest question would be the marijuana version of the cigar bar.
I don't know.
Not just the retail facilities.
Right.
So would you call it a blunt
All
bar?
right, I misunderstood your question. I don't know what the state regulations are gonna say about who's going to be able to sell recreational marijuana. Matt, do you have anything on that? I haven't looked at it yet, so I can't tell you.
In part of the rules, they put that you can't have a social place to smoke marijuana, so you can't have a place, like a restaurant can't
blunt
open an
bar.
area that you can go in
Right.
and have edibles or smoke. That's part of the new thing that you can't.
And I'm aware that the liquor store lobby lost out and they're not gonna be able to sell either. A lot of that is gonna wait the final version of the regulations as to who can and can't sell in conjunction with another business, to answer your question. But certainly a standalone pot shop is going to be allowable.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious on how that would work financially. If this were going to get into the marijuana business and start selling that, how does that work with the federal laws? Because federally, you can't bank that money.
That's correct.
So how is the town going to benefit financially if it's illegal money federally?
You're exactly right, and
I can attribute to some of that. I know how they're operating. And I've had a lot of conversations with Mr. DeCaro about it. They're a straight cash business.
Right.
So they can't do,
It's going to benefit our school system, our library,
Well, we get-
our town.
they still have to pay taxes.
they,
It's
They pay,
well, they're not
they pay a
actually,
check. They still pay us a check.
I think it-
Under the contract, that's got nothing to do with how they bank it. They will write us a check. I don't think they're gonna be delivering.
So if we make money off the pot, cannabis, and it goes into this town, we get cash. We take the cash that we earn from that. What do we do with it?
so I believe that they've got regulations on how it's used. And I think it's a matter of being like almost
Goes
a,
into the general fund.
It goes into our general fund as any
cover-
other tax
yeah.
payment would.
So then would that general fund support the senior center and
Sure.
support the library?
Yeah.
well, the general fund supports
Anything-
everything, doesn't
Anything
it?
the town meeting approves.
Right.
Yeah.
How much money would that be? I mean, how many fields would we have? This is something the town really has to think about.
Well, it would all really depend on how many stores there are and what their gross sales are. So if they end up, let's say, for example, there's 2 recreational marijuana stores that open up in Douglas. And each recreational marijuana store does $2 million each in gross revenue sales. So out of that, we'd have $60,000 of revenue per, so $120,000 would go from these 2 pot stores into the general fund.
And what are we needing?
Ooh.
Money are we needing?
Well, can I jump in on that?
Sure.
The current override amount is $1.5 million that we're looking for. To put that in equivalence to the 3% you get from marijuana sales, you would need businesses doing $50 million a year in marijuana sales in order to get $1.5 million. So that's a lot of pot you gotta sell. I'm not saying something we shouldn't explore, but it's something that is part of the solution. It's not the entire.
Yeah, so
It's a very small part of the solution, I think.
much to the gentleman with the flannel shirts and the hat chagrin, it's not our only source that we're looking at for revenue. So, but I think I've referenced it multiple times after this year's budget season. The entire board is looking for free samples from medical alternatives to try and get us through the rest of this, because it's been pretty rough.
We're trying to attract business, and in all seriousness, it's difficult to turn that down. The cultivation agreements were very lucrative.
What is
because
the percentage on that? Is it?
It's not a percentage, it's a flat amount.
It is.
Yeah, it's 3% gross sales, period, isn't it? On
No, not on cultivation.
on cultivation?
Dollar amount,
$150 for the first one and $80 for the second one, $230 per year.
Yeah, and that doesn't change
230,000 per year.
per year.
Okay.
Your agreement predates the state law, so it will be held,
Oh, okay.
but when it comes up for renewal, it will have to comply with state law, which is 3%.
Okay. When it comes out, when does that happen?
So it's 5-year or 3-year.
5 years.
I think 5,
5
I'd have
years.
to look, I think
So
5.
if this were to happen, what's the realistic timeline?
So I believe medical alternatives is well underway to opening up.
Here in Douglas?
Yeah.
Yeah, for cultivation and
For
growth.
cultivation,
For cultivation?
right.
So
So that's the $250,000.
So it's 230.
230. We still have to get through, we have a moratorium that was put in place, the town meeting voted on and approved
For sales.
for sales, which gave the town time to figure out zoning, regulatory, see where the state was gonna land on all of those things. I believe the moratorium expires,
The end of this year, either December 31st or January 1st, depending on how the vote.
so our hopes is to start, and I hate to use the term, but applying pressure to the zoning board to try and get zoning in place, so that way, when the moratorium does lift, if it is a viable opportunity for us and town meeting feels positive about it, we can start moving forward with additional revenue dollars there.
Those monies won't be immediate either.
No.
Right, it's an additional year.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Lori Colbert, 11 Crescent Lane. This is for Nick Furno. Wanted to ask this question and couldn't be here. So I'm not sure what level of granularity he's looking for, and, you know, obviously not down to the paperclip level. But I know we've seen some kind of bigger picture numbers of what the override would fund. Do you have that more on a line-by-line item?
So, Matt, I think it's only the override itself is impacting the rest of the regular proposed budget, staying relatively flat off of what was there. There was 3 areas that it was going to be contributing into. Do we have that available on that machine, or?
I don't, but I mean, I think we can speak to it now. When it comes to real details, right, the real details we can defer to the superintendent. On the town side, we'd be keeping the library open at its required MAR level, slightly above. But that, so you're gonna take that service that would be cut in the base budget, and you're gonna continue to fund it and leave it open. Then there was capital to the tune of $553,000. The rest was for the schools. Now, I know the school that's more detailed, you know how to use the additional money.
So the schools have a shortfall of $643,000. So in order for us to meet the number, we would have to make $643,000 worth of cuts within the school district, which would translate into a number of different possibilities. I know that Kevin was talking about the whole spreadsheet over the last 10 years of the cuts that have happened. We have done all of those things over the last, I've been here now 9 years, and for 8 years we have cut positions up to almost 20 positions have been cut out of the school district. Some have been reinstated. We have eliminated funding to most of our, over a period of a couple of years, we have eliminated a good deal of money that went into programs such as athletics, advisors, clubs, organizations. We eliminated them. Those were rescued by booster organizations, the athletic boosters, the band and choral and auxiliary team boosters bailed us out. So the money that the way in which we are planning to address that shortfall should the override not go through is the same way that the school committee had decided to absorb the shortfall for this year, which is that we have gone into our revolving funds and have taken even more money out of our revolving funds. So we would stand pat if the override did not go through. We would stand pat by taking an additional $111,000 out of our circuit breaker revolving account, $400,000 out of our school choice money, which is already in the tune of over $1 million, I believe, that we're using in our operating budget. And we would cut $185,000 out of supplies and different area lines. So we would survive for 1 more year. I would say to you that if you think about your own house and you have a slush fund of $30,000 and you spend $20,000 out of that slush fund, you only have $10,000 left. So what the school district has done is taken a calculated risk, and they have appropriated, they are planning to appropriate, they did $400,000 this year, and they're planning on appropriating another $400,000 next year should the override not go through. That would hold us level for the next year. And after that, there would be no reserve that we could use, minimal at best, because we would be in a very dangerous position. So that's how we're planning on surviving. So if the override should go through, we would then not spend the $400,000 out of our revolving account for school choice. We would put the $111,000 back into the circuit breaker account, and we would put the $185 either back into the line items or use that to perhaps hire a couple of positions that we've been in desperate need for. So for the best example I can give you is that, and I know that we have some people who've been on the committee going back 7 or 8 years, because they can verify this is true, that for 8 years, Douglas High School has been trying to get an adjustment counselor. An adjustment counselor is someone who works with students, with parents, with families. They serve as a conduit to counseling services. They provide hospitalization. They work with the hospitals in continuing education. We do not have one in our district. We do have social and emotional issues in our schools, but we do not have one. And the simple reason why we don't is not because we don't want to have an adjustment counselor, is because there just has not been funding to support that adjustment counselor's position. So that means for the past 7 years, the people who have been responding when a student is having a social emotional crisis, and please understand that in 2018, it's from kindergarten through grade 12 that you're seeing these experiences for kids. It's not a great time to be a kid with social media and all the ways people can get at you now. It has become very difficult to be a student and be a kid these days. So that being said, we do not have anyone to sort of triage and then serve as a conduit to the family and to the counseling agency and to the hospital. So it falls on the building principals or the assistant principals or the guidance counselor who are already doing a job. So I guess the long and short of it is our hope, and I've said this in open session a couple of times, the school committee had the courage and had the courage and was willing to take the risk to spend down their revolving accounts to try to stay whole, to avoid continuing to make positional cuts, program cuts that have adversely impacted people's understanding or impression of what our school district is like. And their perception is not very realistic, and it's not very accurate. We have a very strong school district. We have lived within our budget numbers every single year. To do that, we've had to cut positions. We've had to eliminate programs. We've had to eliminate advisorships. We've done everything we possibly can to stay and continue to offer a solid education in Douglas, which we do. We're a level 2 school, and we're doing a fine job with education. But you can't continue to tell people that having a soccer team might happen, might not happen. Having an AP calculus class for your senior year that you've been working to might be there, might not be there. It's not the way to run the school district. So that's the problem that we run into. So I digress, but the answer is we have a plan in place. I should also say that in open session at FinCom School Committee, and I believe in the Board of Selectmen, we also presented a 2-year, 3-year plan going forward of things that we would like to bring to our school district, such as an engineering program, an animal and plant science program, of which none of those can possibly come to fruition based on where we are financially. We want to offer them, we want to expand, we want to be as competitive as possible, but in order to do that, there needs to be some dollars to support the programs, the purchase of textbooks, the hiring of staff, the supplies and materials that you're going to need. So that's kind of where we are at with the school district. I think we will, fingers crossed, we will get through next year. After that, I think it could be as desperate as, I don't remember, it's 2015, I think was the bad year, where we literally cut virtually everything. All of our programs were cut. We cut, I believe it was 10 or 12 teaching positions. Class sizes went to 30, 31. And that was one of the reasons why the school committee did what they did. We were scheduled to, last year, have kindergarten classes with 27 and 28 students. The state average is 15. That's why we
Maybe you could touch briefly on the threat of more and more students opting out and what financially that means.
So the last override was 2015, I think, 16. And so when that happened and it did not go through, we ended up making those serious and significant cuts. As I said a minute ago, what does that tell you as a parent or as a student? It tells you that programs and course offerings are in jeopardy. So if you want to, do you want to stay in a district where you're not quite sure those programs are going to be in place? So our school choice in numbers have gone down from, I believe it was in 2013 or 14, it was somewhere in the area of 130 students choicing in, which is additional revenue coming into the school department. It is down to 110 now. Thank you. It's down to 110 now. So that's 25 less students who are choicing in, which is 25 less students who are adding additional revenue to our revolving account in the form of school choice. Conversely, the number of students who are leaving and going out to other schools. So if I say to myself, well, I really want to follow this track of academics, I really want to get to AP Calculus, I want to get AP Statistics and AP Calculus BC, I really want to get those in before I graduate. Well, if those become in question, and that is really a driving force of what you want to do in the future, you're going to go to a school where there is not a question of whether that program is going to be there. You're going to enroll in that school. So we've seen students leaving the district. Fewer students coming into the district. The problem with students going out is that adversely impacts the town, because now you're paying school choice dollars to a receiving town. So that has gone up. We had in 2014-15, there were only 39 students in Douglas who choiced out. This year, there are 76. So that means that 37 more students have decided that the issues around funding the school department have said to 37 people in town, I've got to go elsewhere. Now that means that the town is picking up that cost out of their revenue because they have to pay that other school district that's receiving, just like when we receive students. So they've got to fund that student going out.
Kevin, can I
Yep.
add to that?
Yep.
It's actually a double win.
It's also Chapter 7.
Yeah, so the school gets part of their funding from the state in the form of Chapter 78 at about $6,500 per student. So for every student that chooses not to stay in Douglas and go to someplace else, we lose revenue of $6,500. The town picks up a bill for $5,000 on the other side to pay for them to go to a different district. So every time that happens, and I have statistics, again, over the last 3 years, we've seen roughly a net change in school choice between school choice and kids opting to go to BVD or Norfolk Aggie, about 100 students. That net impact has resulted in about $500,000 less revenue for the schools in state aid, less state aid, $500,000, as well as we've seen the assessments for school choice out and for BVT, Norfolk Aggie combined increased by about $500,000 in the last 3 years. Those are going to go up by another $300,000 in FY19. You add them all together, we're looking at about a $1.3 million impact to the town's financial picture of the change in school choice numbers over the last 3 years, which all comes back to not being able to provide certainty around what our school budget and school programs are going to look like.
To expand on the last part of that question from Adam, I'll grab questions with that gentleman, not one first, and give to you after. Is the biggest fundamental difference that you look at in the operating budget with or without the override is with the override, there's no free cash dollars included in that first year budget. So that's all override based, and then free cash money is used or allocated towards capital expense, which is where a healthy budget works. Without the override, what was the free cash number that we were looking at in that? About $500,000.
Can I jump in for a second?
Can I let? Go ahead.
I just don't feel like the question has been answered in its entirety. I just happen to have the FinCom flyer in front of me, and I feel like it's kind of disingenuous to say, well, if you want to know where these numbers are, look at the FinCom flyer. So, you know, I know what is wanted, and, you know, it's just, you know, where is the override money going to go? So I think, you know, it would be good to answer that. $227,572 to the library, $643,647 to the schools, $75,000 to OPEB, and then $553,781 to capital. Among that capital, $67,000 is for a brush chipper, $24,000 is for an asphalt hot box, $20,000 is for a municipal gym door replacement, $95,000 is for municipal gym windows, $140,000 is for police department windows, $68,000 is for a dump truck with a plow, $14,414 is for a school tractor loader, $10,000 is for a air conditioner compressor for the high school, I think, DHSAC compressor. $55,000 is for municipal air conditioning units. $38,000 is for MS4 compliance design. $12,000 is for DMS door card reader, and $10,367 is for portable radios. Sorry, I can't leave a question unanswered.
Why? We can handle what you just said.
It's on the town website.
Okay.
If you go to the town website,
I'm not on the computer right now.
on the home page, it's or you know, it's. Let's see, I have it on my phone. I give you my phone.
So there's nothing for fire and police under, or did I miss that?
I know the radios are for
Windows.
fire.
The radios are for the fire department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Radios and windows.
All right, this gentleman had a question, and then
Here and then maybe.
keep it.
Yeah,
I'll work my way through, I promise.
Commander Wayne Clay, 136 Walnut Street. I'll apologize, I've moved around about 35 years in Lewisburg, so I've seen mostly different forms of government than we have here in Douglas. But two questions. For Kevin, what do we contribute to VBT and what say do we have over that?
Well, I can't tell you what we contribute, that comes out of the town side, but we don't have, I don't know the answer to that. That might be something you might want to answer as to what say do we have in what we pay to EBT.
Well, I know.
Are you trying to throw a softball, or?
I can say that what the Selectmen proposed and FinCom actually also moved forward on the budget was the minimum allotment to DVT per the contract that we'd entered into God knows how many years ago. So we voted to put the minimum assessment forward. As for can we control the kids that go to VBT, they're looked at as part of our school district. So we really don't have a means to say, no, we're not going to send you there. If we opted to withdraw from the VBT contract, they could choice into VBT if Blackstone Valley Tech opted to become a choice in school, because they do offer programs that, Douglas Public School District currently doesn't offer. And we'd be required to allow them to be able to go there to pursue their education. Does that answer your question on
A little bit.
what we can do on it, or?
Yeah, the second question would be, I know that Douglas is somewhat landlocked by the major highways, but what have we done to look at merging services with other towns who can gain some economies of scale?
We do purchasing with other towns that are nearby us, which has helped with purchasing power. And I'll let Matt expand on that.
Actually, you do quite a bit already on organization. So your animal control officer, we share with Uxbridge. Your Veterans Benefits Administration, we share with Uxbridge. But Uxbridge is the lead. We've been in an intermunicipal agreement with Northbridge sharing IT services. It has not worked out for us, so we're going to go and see what the available budget will get us in terms of services. I'm looking at Gene, I'm forgetting something. We share a building inspector with Uxbridge, even though it's not a formal arrangement. He's a full-time employee there, he's a part-time employee here. We don't pay for benefits or loading for him, but we have benefit of the driving around in his car and all those things that go along with it. Those services were plucked off years ago as cost-effective ways to continue to deliver services to the townsfolk from what used to be full-time jobs. Regionalization, the next steps would be police dispatch. We maintain a headcount here and a 911 position from the state. We do get grant funds to be able to do that. Other towns have pulled together. So, Webster and Dudley are currently sharing dispatch. The deeper you get into this, the more of a mixed bag it becomes. Our overtime budget in the police department is relatively low and very stable, because when we have a shift available, our dispatchers are trained officers. They can step into the available shift without a loss of the quality of service to the town, and part-time dispatchers backfill their shift on the dispatch board. So you're keeping things under control. You would lose the ability to do that if you give up your dispatch positions. So every time there's an open shift for vacation, you'd be backfilling with a police officer at time and a half instead of straight time for the dispatcher. So in a way, it is almost a disincentive to regionalize certain things. Other opportunities. Again, we're kind of early in the process of trying to investigate some of these, so I know other people may have looked into it more than I have, but times change and it's time to look into them again. The town of Sutton makes money transporting special ed students because they bought their own buses and they run that part of their service. It's a very expensive part of what Douglas does. It should be looked at every single year. If it doesn't make sense, don't do it. But there's an example, a concrete example of a town next to us that's about the same size that's figured out a way to do things. We have mutual aid that backfills both of our public safety departments when we can't respond to a call because we're already busy. Above and beyond that, there's not a whole lot that you can do away with and not lose significant customer service.
Okay.
So, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Rich Griffin, Perry Street, the paved part.
The paved part of Perry Street.
I'd like to just, one thing that struck me, you mentioned the students that are opting out, that are going to somewhere else. Where are they going? Are they going to Voc?
So there are some that are going to Voc. So a good example is in 2015, we had 79 students going to BBT. This year there's 110. So there's an increase there. There are some students who are going to Norfolk Aggie. So we had one student going there in 2014-15. There are 8 going there now. It's an expense to the town as well. There are some students who are going to, greater number of students who have gone to private school or parochial schools. And then some are school choicing to other schools in the area.
You get about 15 in Uxbridge and about 15 in Northbridge. About? Those are your two biggest.
Can I speak to the BBT question though? VOTEC, our day is not VOTEC, like it's not the same thing anymore, so.
Very familiar.
Okay. Sorry.
So, you had a question?
Yeah, Matt.
I was great. I know where you are with the pot question. I'll get right back to you, I promise. Go ahead.
So I know nothing about this, so I'm just going to put it out there. You guys probably know more than I do. I know when my daughter was in Douglas, we couldn't get an IEP no matter what we did. So I pulled her out, and she went to a school in Greenfield that also did online classes. And by having, they're at a high school, and they did online classes, and by doing the online classes, she got a lot more personal attention. Has Douglas ever thought about trying to do any online stuff for school?
So we offer virtual high school classes already. We have for the last 15, 20 years. The Greenfields, yeah. But it's not a full program, whereas Greenfield is a complete program. So you take all of those classes. Greenfield, by the way, as I recall, I think is on a warning at this point because of it. But I'm a little bit distressed about the fact that the difficulty getting an IEP.
They kept saying no.
Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming that was years ago?
Yes, sir. I'll get to you. You're next, Scott, I promise.
Just want to say my personal experience when the last override didn't pass, even though our son was doing really well at Douglas schools, we were happy with Douglas schools, but when that last override, uncertainty. We didn't know where it was going. We looked at PVT, and now he's going there and he's doing very well. But my actual question was, the 5-year plan. Can you speak to the 5-year plan? You keep reading, people keep saying, oh, they're going to get the money now, and they're going to come back again next year, and the year after that. And then they're going to assess our house again. And if you could speak to that.
Sure. I mean, assessments are what, every 3 years?
It's now 5.
It's out now every 5. So that's a natural part of the town budget, and I mean, I think it's every town.
Well, revaluations.
Yeah, reevaluation. So, and as that I tried to explain before, the 5-year plan or the budget model that was in place still involves us being very strategic in managing the funding that's there, and making some key moves around health insurance, what was the other, and transportation costs, and trying to control. Those are the 2 big variables that sit there. Barring something catastrophic, I guess, is the only way to explain it, to where one particular revenue account just explodes in costs of the town. There's real no financial need to go back to the taxpayer next year or the year after and say we require an additional override. I don't really know how to.
Well, because I think the most important part of the answer, Mr. Chairman, is what we are not going to do. So the 5-year plan is no new headcount on the town side, period. We're not going to hire anybody. On health insurance, the chairman alluded to it, we have 2 options. We have to do at least one of them. One is to increase the premium co-share. So right now we're at 80-20 with our employees, with 80 being the town, 20 being the standard now is 75-25. We can move to that, or we can move to a higher deductible. But that is the one most rapidly growing account in the town, and every 2 or 3 years, you got to take a crack at it again to keep expenses. So what we're talking about there is reducing about $146,000 out of the health insurance budget at some point in the next 3 years. I'd like to finish negotiating contracts with unions for this 3-year period before hitting them with that, but I think fiscal 20 or 21 is when you have to do that. No expense account will grow unless it is tied to an industry that we can't control. So I won't sit here and tell you that I know what gasoline prices are going to be tomorrow, right? But we don't anticipate massive increases over the next 5 years, but that's one account. We'll try to keep a lid on it. We'll try to manage it. All the others, whether it's office supplies or anything else that we buy, we will be sharpening our pencil on the procurement side to make sure we're getting the best deal for the town, which is something that we're already putting in place. You know, going through every single line item in the budget, trying to find a way to save money for the people of the town is what we do. It's what's been done before I started here, and we're going to continue to do that. But the key thing is, on the town side, no growth to any account on the basis of some grand plan. It is continue to provide the services you provide today at the best possible cost in the next 5 years.
Scott?
So I just want to roll back a little bit when we have the discussion about school choice.
Could you come up and use we're live streaming. It was just brought to my attention that the people on Facebook are angry at us because they're not hearing us.
Okay. Scott Yacino, 22 Gilboa Court. I just want to roll back a little bit to when we were talking about school choice. The superintendent pointed out that they're digging deep into the school choice revolving fund in order to, over the next 2 years, make ends meet. However, he also, I think, without saying he was sounding a warning bell, said something that everybody here should really be thinking about, and that is that the school choice fund, money that comes in for school choice depends on the number of kids that are coming in, and money that goes out of the town is the number of kids that are leaving, and those numbers are going like this. So after the 2-year plan, if they dig deeper and deeper into the school choice fund, by the 3rd year, my prediction, and I was on school committee for 9 years, my prediction is that that's going to flip. And now the town's going to have to kicking in more money to make up that difference on your mandatory net school spending requirement that the state tells us we have to pay. So if we don't do something to stave that off, you know, we've been saying for a long time that we were heading for a cliff. And now it's getting really steep. And when you fall off that cliff, it's going to be very, very hard to recover, particularly with the school choice. If we become a net negative school choice district, that's going to have a huge, huge impact, not only on the school's budget, because they're already, without the override, they're at minimum, correct? Mm-hmm. You can't cut them. And if the amount of money coming in is lost, you're going to have to make it up. So it's going to get worse. That's all.
And if I could just echo what Scott was sharing with you, is that that's the decision that the school committee had to make last year, was that there was not money to support positions. We were at a point where it was, I think, $700,000 again, that we were going to need to cut. And at that point, we had already said that we were at a cliff, and I know what the public said. Well, they really weren't at a cliff, because look at, the programs are still there, the teachers, school's still open. But the reality was that we dug deeper into the revolving accounts, put ourselves in a calculated risk, is the best way to say it, to try to stem the tide of uncertainty, which Mr. Fontaine just mentioned. And in doing so, they made a commitment to 2 years. We are in the first year. They've made a commitment to the second year. And what will follow after that will be, again, more than likely a shortfall of $600,000 to $700,000 or $800,000, because that's what it's been for the last 7 or 8 years. And there will be no way for us to stave that off by using revolving accounts and circuit breakers. So that shortfall will once again begin the process of cutting programs, cutting teachers, larger class sizes, elimination of extracurriculars. It will all start all over again. And Scott was on the committee, and I was in the room with them, and we indicated back in 2013 that without the override, you were going to see a change in students attending, students coming in. So we went from basically a 4-to-1 school choice in ratio. Now it's dropped, now it's changing, as he mentioned. If you go back to before the high school was built, which was in 2004, I believe, 3, 4, it was the opposite. It was 4-to-1 kids were going out and coming in. When you built the school, the district became attractive, students came in, and they continued to come in large numbers. And that was a good thing for the district. Now, 3 years later, that number is, as Scott was saying, is starting to level off, and that's a dangerous financial proposition. We'll go back to what it was like before you built the high school, and that would be a 4-to-1 going the other way.
Yeah, I promise. You already had your bite, yeah, but you'll get another one. Yeah.
Jay Ucino, 27 Gilboa Court. I have a comment and a question. And first, my comment is regarding the school. And as you were presenting earlier and talking about the things that you hope to add in the future, I think it's fair to say a lot of people here are far removed from high school. And most people sit here and think, well, I didn't have that, I didn't have this, I didn't have that, and I've done fine. But you need to realize times have changed. And even the position you were talking about, the counselor, it's fair to say watching television on a nightly basis, that's probably something that's needed. So, yeah. And my question, though, is actually kind of reverse on a different topic. With the valuations that were done last year, I know I personally pay about another $500 a year in taxes already. And I haven't heard of anyone that's paying less after those valuations. And that amount that I'm paying exceeds what I would have had to pay had an override passed last year. So without having any other information from me personally, it seems like the town had a lot of additional money that they were seeking, but I don't know where that went, because it seems like we're in a worse position this year than we were last year. Am I making sense with that or no?
The levy can only increase by 2.5% each year. So you probably saw a redistribution based on the valuation of your in particular home. So there were some that went down, you just happened to go up.
Okay.
So we do a revaluation every 5 years, and they look at, and that's based on sales. And you received an impact notice, which is Douglas is one of the few that send that out to the residents so they can see how their tax bill will be impacted. And your individual tax bill is based on that. But overall, Douglas is on the lower end, at least in the Blackstone Valley area, as far as taxes are concerned.
And Jay, most people, like, when their tax bill goes down, that's not something anybody's really gonna, throw it on
Right.
social media.
Right. Right. But would someone be able to tell me that on the whole, then, the taxes we took in last year as a town versus the taxes we took in this year as a town, not speaking on an individual basis, I mean, did that increase, decrease, stay the same?
2.5%. The levy increases 2.5%. We levy to the max.
Okay.
Plus new growth, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I promise I'm gonna get him and then you can. I promise. He just keeps standing up. He's just, he's a nuisance.
Luke McNeil, 25 Maryland Drive. Matt, you had mentioned at Sutton is running buses, and they've turned that into a profitable enterprise. We've been spitballing ideas on Facebook for ever now, and a lot of those ideas, they seem good to me, but when it comes into talking about them seriously, I find out that a town can't make money in a lot of different ways. So what are some valid ways that revenue can be generated by a town that are, legal?
I commend you for finally going the legal route.
Well, I'm not going to give up on the school transportation idea because the more I look into it, the more intrigued I become. Munson has their own school district. They bought their own buses.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to be willing to make the capital investment to purchase the equipment and insure it.
Does it make sense to use that override money to buy a bunch of buses instead?
Well, I know it's something that Matt and I had discussed, but I mean, it's not really, it's one of those things that we have to put forward as a capital expense to town meeting.
If you're gonna do something like that, you're gonna make sure you really bake the cake and make sure that it rolls for you. And that's gonna take a fair amount of analysis. What are other sources of revenue other than, I made these slides, I might as well show you, because I think it's moderately interesting. But see that pie? The blue piece is what residential taxpayers pay. All the rest of the revenue from the levy is those tiny little pieces. So I don't want to get the propeller hat because I used to get too many of those as a kid. But the reality is, economic development reduces the tax burden on you. It doesn't bring new revenue into the town. It diversifies your base so that you're drawing the same amount of taxes from a much bigger pie than you had originally. So that's the attractiveness of it, is that it provides you with the opportunity, instead of having the household always paying that bill, it's going to a business that owns a piece of property that's probably worth a lot more than the typical single-family home. One of the sources of revenue are payments in lieu of taxes, ground leases for solar farms, the kinds of things that you, and that's what everybody sees at the end of the rainbow with any energy-producing asset, whether it's a gas-fired plant or a solar farm or turbines on windmills, is that typically there's a payment that's not tied to the value of the asset. It's just a payment made to a community for the right to do what they're doing. So for power plants, they tend to be very lucrative because it's paid on a megawatt-hour basis, and it can be a lot of money. So the jurisdiction where I used to work, it was $1 million a year on a $14 million budget. But those are the things that you have to look to try to do in order to get out of this very narrow slices of the pie that are here.
But the town can't have like a bake sale and then put all that money into account. It's the bake sale money, look how much we made. There are laws that govern it, the ways in which money can come into the town? What are some examples of legal ones?
You could have the
You
bake
could have
sale
a bake
and donate
sale.
the money to the town.
Let's have a bake sale.
There was a judge in Rhode Island that ordered a community to have more bake sales.
You got a question, sir?
Yeah, a couple actually. One is, I think you guys have done a tremendous job in what you've been doing. I do think, however, that the income streams, at least what you've explained to us, seems to be a little weak. And when you look at where you are, you know, we had to ask questions. You did a good job of explaining what happens with a 5-year plan, but my question about the 5-year plan is, where are the increase in revenues coming from? You know, you talked a little bit about some of the businesses that you've tried to attract. Where are we as far as just residential development and as far as subdivisions being open? Those are sources of revenue. And then the other question relative to revenue is, where are we on arrears in taxpayers in real estate income?
We're pretty vigilant on the tax collection side. We send out demands timely. We go through the tax lien process as well. And for 2 years now, we had a tax lien assignment sale, where if someone's in tax title and they have not made their payment agreements as they indicated they would, then we have a tax lien assignment sale. We advertise.
Can you tell me what that dollar amount is and what percentage of the income it's impacting?
Dollar amount is for?
And the amount of that we're in arrears, that people are in arrears of paying their property taxes.
I don't have that with me now.
Okay.
The last quarter bill is due May 1st or 2nd.
Okay, but we're actively seeking and getting after these folks.
We're very
and the other
vigilant
things.
with our tax.
Okay, the other piece that I would mention relative to the school department and the conversation going on about school of choice, I guess I would challenge, you made a mention about opening up the plant and soil sciences things. I think that is, I would challenge that, and that we can't compete at a town this size with the Aggie or with Voc. We know that we're going to lose a number of students relative to that's the courses that they're looking for. We can't compete with that. We couldn't afford it, for one. So I think that's a huge mistake. But what I think your other points are is how do we attract people back in that other schools aren't offering, that we can then, so your APs and all those other kinds of things is really the route that you should go down, and not try to be in competition with an Aggie or with a Voc. It is just, that's the quality of education. Somebody over here mentioned Aggies and Vocs are not like they were 40 years ago when I was in school. You know, they're technical. It's the quality of the education is supreme, and I don't think that we can compete with that as a town. So I would really challenge that thought process.
So I would take exception and say to you that we certainly can.
You can't even afford a counselor. How can you afford to add departments to that level?
We have sustained over the last 9 years of cuts. We have sustained the quality of our programs to the point where we still are a level 2 school, highly regarded, extremely competitive. Going back to your point, I'm not sure if you're aware, but approximately 8 years ago, we got on board with the Massachusetts Science Initiative, and we opened our school to AP courses. And we presently offer 13 APs at Douglas High School. Prior to that, we offered 4. When we opened it up and offered those AP courses, that's when we saw numbers of students opting to come into our school district, and our school choice numbers continued to grow because we were offering what other districts could not offer.
Right.
Now, that being said, when you mentioned about how we cannot compete, if you take a good look, and you can go onto the DESE website, and you can compare our SAT and AP scores to those of what you say is Blackstone Valley Tech and Norfolk, which are all great schools, but they are not, their percentage of, in AP, you have qualifying scores. a 3, 4, or a 5.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
What I'm saying to you is
but
that
my point is that
you can't compete with a Voc school and provide every single thing that they're offering
No, we're
in
not gonna offer-
Douglas.
we're not
That's what I'm
looking to-
saying.
we're not
You
looking
guys are concerned about everybody going out. I'm just saying you made a statement that you want to do some type of plant and soil sciences. That will not combat somebody going and or compete against what's happening at Norfolk. It's ridiculous to think that way. That's all I'm saying. Is that you're talking about a very small piece.
Right.
Focus on the AP things about we can bring students in, that we can enhance the programs that we're having, rather than developing programs along more than something that's offered elsewhere. That's my only point.
So, and I understand your point. Your point has great merit. The reason why I brought that up is because we have been contacted by an organization that is looking to open up in the Blackstone Valley a collaborative school. The collaborative school right now on board is Uxbridge and Northbridge. We are, depending upon what happens financially, we are in the pipeline, and they're going to offer this collaborative, which is schools in the valley, will offer these programs. We're not offering them. We're going to join that, hopefully join that collaborative, which means that other districts will be
Okay, that explains it better than what my impression was. What you were saying is that we're just going to do this as an independent.
Oh, no. But the other piece of it is, sir, that we have reached out. They have reached out to us. I have actually had conversation with the gentleman. He wants to build a satellite campus. The satellite campus will be under the direction of UMass and Wachusett Regional Community College, and they need a satellite campus. And so I spoke with Kevin and with Matt, and have him interested in the grammar school. That he would take that over, renovate it, and turn that into a college satellite, offering some of these courses. So students in Douglas could take those classes and come out of high school with college credits, because they're taking them at that satellite campus as part of this collaborative. So that's why, and I will
in
put
the curriculum and the collaborative will be.
So I will put the moving forward presentation that I did for Finance Committee and School Committee on the website tomorrow.
Okay.
And you can take a look at it, at what it is. So we're not doing it on our own. We're doing it as a collaborative. And the hope is that kids are going to say, well, if I can do my animal and plant sciences that I really want to do, and still stay in town with the kids that I've grown up with, maybe I won't go to Norfolk Agricultural. Maybe I'll stay in the community.
I was just going to offer that point. I don't think we have to be everything that Norfolk Aggie is.
Nope.
We have the one we're going for is location. It's a long-ass drive to go to Norfolk Aggie. So you don't have to be 100% of what they are. If you can be 75% of what they are, you might be able to retain those kids.
Yeah, if what you're offering is comparative and competitive.
But that program is probably 2 years away, sir. Not next school year, but the 19-20 school year, if we can get on board. And of course, that's all depend. We don't want to join that collaborative and find out that we're making cuts, and now I got to pull out of the collaborative.
That's my point. Is that if you're going to add all that stuff, it's going to be paid for somehow,
right?
And you're not at the expense of something else,
right? And so the other thing with that adjustment counselor, sir, is that I don't want to bring that adjustment counselor on staff and then find out that we're $655,000 in the hole, and I've got to cut positions. Well, that's the last person in. Right. That person's going to have to go.
Right. And
so we want to sustain.
I'm 100% with you on that.
Yeah.
We definitely need to do something in the schools.
Right.
For sure.
Thank you. Scott? After Scott, I'm kind of curious, is there people here that are against, like just wholeheartedly against the override, that have some thoughts or opinions that they want to share with us? Or questions?
So I wanted to talk about the ability of the school to compete with some of the Voc schools and Aggie schools. First thing is that my impression is that the kids that are the academics still have access to the APs. The kids that are the high-level academics, they still have access to the AP programs, and they're not bolting the way the kids in the regular educational area are. Kids that are losing athletics, some of those kids are bolting because of that. But in order for us to compete for the earth sciences or the plant sciences, it's not too difficult to see us being able to build a program that will compete in that area, even on our own, because those kids that are going cost us $24,000 apiece.
Approximately.
22 plus transportation.
Yeah. 22 plus transportation. So 22 plus transportation for those 8 kids, $170,000. If you can build a program in town, some of the kids that are choicing out that are in the middle, just going to other towns, may actually stay if they have access to that. And definitely the kids that are going to the Aggie school to get access to those programs. We've had kids in the past that went to Aggie, lasted 2 months and came back because Douglas was still a great school that offered pretty much everything they wanted, because they were on the bus too long. Norfolk, like Brett said, it's a long, long drive. So if we can get some things through our district that compete with particularly with Aggie, I think that's a win for the district.
And so we're trying. I've actually stepped back a little bit because the gentleman was really looking for us to make a formal commitment, and we're holding off until we're sure that it's the right fit for us. But if it's a go, we would then look to offer, as I said, animal and plant sciences. We've already contacted and reached out, and I've met with the gentleman over at the Orchard. They're on board, as has the director of this program, has met with them as well. So they're on board to provide us with the plant and the animal piece of it. So we're looking at an engineering piece. The engineering piece is at Northbridge. Northbridge has a facility already, and they're already on board with it. And then the other pieces that we're looking to add into our curriculum in the high school would be biomedical and science. Drawing a blank right now. It'll come to me, and I will say it.
Engineering.
No, well, the engineering we're also looking to. We have presently, but we're looking to expand that and make it a 4-year program, with the 4th year being an internship. So the students go out and they actually do 2 periods out and get work experience. So that's the plan. It is just in its infant states right now.
I'd like to get away a little bit from the school questions, and people know I run a disaster team, connect with emergency management. I would really like to hear from the fire and the police. There is getting by. I heard 8,600 residents in town, and we have 2 police officers on duty. I want to hear, in light of our world the way it is, because you wouldn't be able to go to school or deal with textbooks or anything if we're not safe. And so I would like to hear, especially because I'm a senior and so is my husband. We're seniors.
He might not agree with that.
He might not, but I got him to go to exercise. So I want to hear from the fire and police directly, or from somebody who can represent them honestly, because I care about their services and their departments, and because I do run a disaster team as well. I'd like to hear from them about, are we at optimal functioning, or are we just barely getting by?
So our fire chief isn't here, but our police chief is.
Thank you.
So for police, I can tell you that we're getting by. Like Mr. Wojcik said, in an ideal world, if for a town our size with our call volume, we would have a sergeant and at least 2 patrolmen on to handle what we have. We have 15 full-time officers with myself, the lieutenant, and a detective sergeant who's doing all the major investigations. So you break that down, you're at, with vacation time and time off, holidays, you're looking at 2 patrolmen on the road, 1 in the east, 1 in the west. If we're lucky, we'll have 3 on with a supervisor. But
What's optimal?
Optimal?
What's optimal for safety?
Perfect world. We can't put less than 2 officers out on the road in this day and age, in the world we live in. It's just not safe, no matter where you work. Douglas, Barry, it doesn't matter. Just for certain calls, by state guidelines, there's mandates. You're supposed to send 2 officers to a domestic violence call, and you have to. The days of working by yourself,
30 years ago in Douglas are gone. So we're getting by. I mean, we do have shifts where we have 3 on, but the majority of them are 2. Sometimes it's a full-time officer and a part-time officer. Like I said, in a perfect world, you have a sergeant, 2 patrolmen at a minimum, and as the population goes up and the call volume goes up, you have to look at what the town needs.
Is our call volume going up?
Yeah, every year it's been going up. We're about 13,500 calls per year, almost 600 arrests per year. It's always going up. Goes up a couple hundred a year. Yes.
Question: does the amount of police officers on duty, does that go up in the summer because of Wallem Lake, or are you guys spending a lot of time down there and we're not having anybody?
Yeah, it varies. Again, it depends on vacation time and times of the year, what we have for part-timers, what's the overtime budget. Obviously, 4th of July weekends, nice weekends, we'll try and make sure that we have 3 people on.
That's state, right? State.
It is, yeah. State has jurisdiction over it.
Why do they not have state police officers responding to that?
Because the closest barracks is Millbury. We're in communication with the state police, but they have usually a trooper working the desk and 2 troopers on the patrol, 2 or 3. So you got 1 on 146 maybe, if you're lucky, 1 on 495.
So they can't help you much?
Well, they help to a certain extent, but we're in Douglas. So if something happens down there in Douglas, we're the closest. Regardless, the state's going to take it over anyway. It's their jurisdiction, but we're the first responders. So if they need an ambulance, it's going to be our ambulance. If there's, if they need police intervention, we're going to call the barracks. The barracks is going to get the call. But again, your nearest trooper could be on 495. So we're going to be the first responders. I mean, we're the police, we're the fire. If someone in Douglas calls, we go.
One more question.
Yeah.
I should probably know this already, but do we get any help from the state, any kind of funding at all for you guys going down there to help you guys or help the town out for you guys having to respond to it?
That we do. There is a fund that they set up, and Selectman Morse could explain that more to you. But
yeah, we haven't hit 50,000 in the fund, but there's a dollar amount that goes with every admission that goes into the park, that goes into an account that's earmarked specifically for Douglas and specifically for public safety. So that account has not even hit 50,000 as of yet. I know that our last conversation that we had with Senator Fatman is that they're looking at increasing that dollar value to try and help that account grow much more quickly.
And it's just for the state park. I mean, we work very well with the state police, and believe it or not, the state police has 2,400 troopers. They're spread all across the state. I mean, they're more than willing to come down here and help us if they have the manpower. It's just like I said, the state park is in Douglas, and when they need an emergency response, we're the closest. We're going to be the first ones there, and that's just the way it is. They need an ambulance. Our ambulance is the closest. So we do work well with them as far as what we get from the state. They give us what they can. And on holidays and nice weekends, we call them. If they have extra patrols, they'll send somebody down there. 4th of July, they're usually pretty good, and they help us out. And they've helped us out over the years. But during the summer, it is a busy place.
Chief, just last question. Is there anything that you've applied for in funding that's been not approved?
Over the past years, yeah, we've applied for some equipment and stuff that we were unable to get. We've had an issue with the cruisers a couple years ago, but seem to be on track with that now, where we can replace them every couple of years. So we're in a good place right now.
Thank you.
I think every department has felt the struggles that the town has faced over the last year, police and fire. And I think Selectman Morse has indicated that we all work together. We understand the financial constraints that we were under, and unfortunately, we had to work with what we had. And all the departments have been, willing to do that and just go the extra mile. And that's coming police, fire, highway, school.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I want to finish answering the question for fire and ambulance. Speaking to the machine, they say, right?
That one works for the people listening online, but not for the audience.
All right. Well, I'll try to project, but modern practice, and I think you know this, but I don't know that everybody else in the room does, is to have as many people staffing ambulance 24/7 as you have police officers on the road, which is the current standard in Douglas. You have 3 platoons of 2 and 1 floater budgeted, and that won't change. You won't go up or down under either budget. My view coming in from the outside to this town was that some of the expense budgets have been hollowed out, and both the basic budget and the contingent budget are the same because it's necessary. The town side has taken so many of the hits over the years, it's necessary to put some funding into those expense accounts on both police and fire. Speaking for the fire perspective, there's concern about the capital stock of the fire department and whether or not the ambulance is in as good a shape as it needs to be and other items have been purchased within their life cycles so they're not failing on us. I guess I have the privilege of saying something that's not doom and gloom in that you have an exceptional police department and you have an exceptional fire department. You are blessed that people are not churning out of those jobs. So my background includes working for jurisdictions where we were constantly going out and recruiting 4 or 5 police officers every year, and 5 or 6 or 7 firefighters every year. Morale collapses, training collapses, the ability to make coordinated responses. Everybody's just learning the job, and it's a terrible situation to be in. You're not there, and hopefully you'll never get there. You have got a very professionalized police force and fire department that you just built up. On the fire and ambulance side, we've already made progress because the chief has made a couple of things priority. So the town has already purchased emergency cardiac monitors, defibrillators for both the frontline ambulance and the backup ambulance. You have brand new equipment, and you also have a stable and secure software package now for patient records and electronic billing. That was funded this year out of free cash. What you try to tell people is that it's expensive to run a fire department. There's a lot of equipment on those trucks. And a lot of what was purchased by the town of Douglas was purchased using grant funds. There's no guarantee that those grant funds will be there for the replacement cycle. So there's hose, there's all the equipment on the ambulance, from the consumables like medicine right down to the more sophisticated, you know, the gurney system that locks the patient into the back and all the rest of that. Those are the next critical items, and that we're trying to address those through the capital budget that's part of the override. So that will also include probably what to me is the single most glaring need of the fire department is portable radios that work everywhere in town. So we do have situations right now where there are certain locations in town where it's actually the police have to bounce to the fire and then the fire bounces back.
Like a tin can with a string? Or
sort of.
One of those.
A little more sophisticated.
A little bit more sophisticated than that, but you know, there's inquiries being made about you know, high frequency bandwidth and other things to get these guys up to the modern standard so they can communicate with their surrounding departments. And I'll only say this because I think it's important for people to know how important that is. It wasn't that long ago, there was a fire in Oxford. They didn't feel like they had staff on hand from Oxford to manage the incident. So the incident command passed to an out-of-town company that had responded from Auburn. They were on a different frequency. They were in the fire. They called a mayday and nobody heard them. So they bailed out just before it flashed over, but it everybody in the Blackstone Valley. We've got to be able to talk on the same frequency and get to people who are in danger because everything happens.
Interoperability.
Yep.
Thank you.
Is there any space in town to put a repeater that you can find? Where is?
Pam Schwartz, 343 Southeast Main Street. I really have two questions I would like to have addressed. I've lived in Douglas a little over 50 years. I've seen a lot of things come and go, things that were successful, things that failed. Former teacher here in Douglas, really enjoyed it, so I applaud you for your efforts to keep everything going. The need for that is undeniable. Joanne, thank you for bringing up the theme of seniors in this town. I have two questions. One on the override. If it should fail, the library's in jeopardy of being on the chopping block. So my question is, what would it take once our finances and revenues start to improve to bring the library back online? I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what it would cost, what are the involved procedures for getting a library reinstated and reaccredited. And I think we need to know that, looking at the override vote. And my second question is, what is the life expectancy of our senior center if this override doesn't pass? Because now with the baby boomers coming on board, the needs are arising for this portion of our community, and we're not discussing that at this time. And I think that that is something in the very immediate future that needs to be addressed. And I think the folks here need to hear a little bit about that.
So I can go over part of it if you'd like, Matt. So it's not if the library's on the chopping block if it fails. It is on the chopping block if it fails. Realistically speaking, in the event that the library closes, it would take an astronomical financial windfall to open it back up. My genuine fear is that when it closes, the library's closed permanently. Because I just don't see with bringing the building into ADA compliance and then backfilling up to get into the MAR to be able to get it to where it needs to be to reopen and recertify. So to answer the question, as I see it, when the library closes, Douglas will be a town without a library for a very prolonged period of time. Take one moment.
Can you expand on the ADA portion? I'm not sure everyone really understands.
So the Americans with Disabilities Act, so there isn't, there's no elevator in to be able to get the people with disabilities up to...
Yeah, there's currently a capital project. The trustees have plans to bring the library into ADA compliance. It's about a $2.5 million project when the cost was re-estimated 2 years ago. They've never brought it forward to a vote because, you know, given the financial state of the town, it's not seen as a reasonable request. Right now, we're able to limp along without ADA compliance. It's not an ideal situation, but as long as we don't go over certain thresholds for how much we spend on building improvements and maintenance that are relative to the value of the property, we're kind of safe. We're safe from the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're safe, you know, more importantly, from the Massachusetts Office on Disabilities. They're actually the more stringent of the two requirements. But if the building were to close entirely and the town were to try to reopen a public library, at that point you're opening a new facility, and it would have to be in compliance with, it would have to be in full compliance, you know. It would have to follow all the rules of the ADA as well as the Massachusetts Office on Disability. So you would, if you wanted to open it in its current location, you would be looking at about a $250,000 project. I mean, $2.5 million renovation project, unless you tried to, you know, open it somewhere else. The thing about MAR, the municipal appropriation requirement, has always been the driving factor of my budget. If you think about, you know, people keep talking about the minimum net school spend. You know, that's the threshold you're not allowed to drop below. Well, MAR is the threshold we're not allowed to drop below. The state won't come in and force you to, you know, fund your library, but they'll cut you off from library resources because the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners does not guarantee reciprocal borrowing privileges or really any privileges for any municipality that doesn't fund its library at that level. And that level is just simply 2.5% increase over the average of the last 3 fiscal years. So the longer your library is closed, the cheaper you can open it up again operating, because like if the library were to completely close for 3 years, you basically have 3 years of zero MAR. So you haven't had library service for 3 years. So you've saved that amount of operating expenditure. If you want to bring it back, you can bring it back at pretty much any level of funding you want, but it will have to be in a fully ADA compliant facility.
So on the senior center side of it, as much as I hate to say it, the override doesn't go through this year, that will be a cut that we'd be looking at seriously in the following year to try and balance the budget.
And just not to overstate the case, but we've already spoken about how the schools are not the schools of our youth. The senior center is no longer the senior center of the past, where people congregated only for social purposes and some additional nutrition. Those are still essential services, but we rely upon the senior center and the staff there to do a lot more than that. So just this past winter, we had 2 major storm events where we lost power through much of the town. Our senior center director did wellness calls to all of the seniors she knew had needs at home for power. So if you're diabetic, you need a refrigerator. If you're on oxygen, you need a power source to run your oxygen machine. She knows who those people are, so she can reach out to them and help us be proactive as a town in seeing to the needs of seniors. Our population in this country is aging. We'll gradually go through 28, 29, 30% of our population that will be seniors. We also provide all of those people who are aging into that group with information. And that's probably one of the most important functions of the senior center is how do I don't get it, and I study stuff like this. Medicare Part B, what option am I going to get for Part D? Who's going to pay for it? How much is it going to cost me? There are counselors that provide people with guidance on all of those issues, how to get fuel assistance. Sometimes, depending on where you are in life, you may need supplemental nutritional assistance, the SNAP program. Those entire range of services are coordinated through one place that's local here in Douglas. So the impact on the quality of life of not having that facility would be very, very significant. It goes way beyond line dancing and bingo and cards.
Good evening. I'm Brian Murphy, 93 Northwest Main Street. Thank you all for having this open information session this evening. I have a question for Justin. I have 2 questions, one for Justin. And when it comes to the library, if the library closes, will patrons retain their borrowing privileges at other libraries? And my second question is about property values. I've heard that if the override fails, property values in town will be depressed even further. I'm not an expert in real estate. I don't know if any of you are, but do you see that happening if the override fails? Thanks.
Go first, Justin.
Sure. The easy answer is no. Right now, as long as you provide a certified public library, then the MBLC guarantees that patrons in Douglas taxpayers can check out any other certified public library in the Commonwealth. If you cease to provide a certified public library, either by dropping below minimum service thresholds or by defunding your library, you're not considered an active participant in the system anymore. You're cut off from state aid, you lose the grants, and you lose reciprocal borrowing privileges. The MBLC doesn't say other municipalities cannot loan to residents of the 01516 zip code, but they won't. It's written into most of the collection development policies in other libraries. They won't give a free ride to a municipality that won't fund its own. Regarding property values, there actually have been studies done about the effect of a public library on properties around it. And if you're within 1/4 of a mile of a library, The estimated increase on your property value is about 15%. It drops off further than that until it gets more like 10, 5, 3. There's certain radial thresholds that I would have to look at the studies against to know off the top of my head. But, you know, people say that public libraries do not have an impact on property values, but, you know, data says otherwise. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So to expand on the property value side of it, as more services get cut from the town, it's going to become less desirable for people to want to purchase. So if you look at it to where you have a distressed school district, and I mean, I do have friends that are realtors, and the library may be a portion of a property value. I haven't looked that deep into the data, but I certainly know Justin does his homework. So if he says it, I'd say it's most likely true. But overall, like the Mass Association of Realtors says, that the things that drive property values are a healthy school district and, you know, an active police force and a low crime rate. And those are the things that you kind of look for, to where as we start going through these cycles of budget cuts, it's going to impact our district, which will become a distressed district, which will directly have a negative impact on your town. And that means a negative impact on your property values. The other one that there's been speculation back and forth regarding, you know, if the town ends up in receivership, you know, what does that mean for my property value? Again, I couldn't imagine that people would want to willingly purchase a home in a town that's currently actively sitting in receivership and trying to figure out its financial situation. To where I think that also would have a negative impact on property values. But to address one that I think a lot of people would think is that if your property value goes down, well, so doesn't your tax rate. That doesn't happen. You'll still continue to pay the level of taxes that you're paying today, so your bill won't go down, but the value of your home will, which means your per thousand rate will go up, to where if the home values decrease enough, you could be looking at $22, $23, $24 per thousand as your tax rate. So, and I know a lot of people judge their tax rates based off of the per thousand number, but that's just a small part of the overall equation, is you have to look at the average tax bill, or what your tax bill is, and then look at a comparably valued home sitting in another town and be able to do a stare and compare. Does that help a little bit with your question? It does, yeah. Thank you.
I think it's sort of common sense that property values are going to be impacted, because the primary buyer of a home is going to be a young family moving in town. So what are they going to look at? What's the school system doing? Is there a library in town? If you've got problems there, then somebody says, gee, I got to send my kids to a private school. What's that going to cost? And they compare that to another community which has an excellent school system. You know, so it's pretty obvious that that's going to really impact. So if you've got a home and someday you're going to be selling it soon or whatever, you have to think very carefully on what it's going to mean if we don't maintain top quality schools and we haven't done this right now.
I'd just like to put a fine point on the math, because everybody's made great points. So what does that translate into? Let's take, you know, the average is something like 296,000 and change. Well, let's use round numbers, real round numbers, and say the average home in Douglas is 300,000, and your tax bill's a little bit under 5,000 a year.
Your speaker is gone out, by the way.
Yeah.
We don't know why, but it's hard to hear you a little bit. The speaker. That's why.
This is for the speaker. What's this?
Nope, I'm not. There we go.
Is that better?
Should get better.
All right, I'll do this instead of trying to look at you. So pardon me on the eye contact. If your average home is 300,000 and your average tax bill is about 5,000, and we're talking about the override being 450 or about 450 a year. Look, I think we all have empathy for folks who have aged in place and maybe completely reliant upon Social Security. $450 is a lot of money. So to be fair and balanced, I think we have to acknowledge that. But there is a flip side to that. If you're at 300,000 and you lost just $10,000 in value on your home because the schools and services in the town were weak, that's 3%. That's the real estate agent's commission. but how many years of $450 a year would you have to go through to make up the 10,000 you lost? 20? So that's, you know, a lot of people don't plan on selling their home, but that's how long it would take you to make up the value you lost because you didn't want to go forward and defend the services.
Thank you. My name's Joe Biagioni, 5 Johnson Court, Douglas. I'm also chairman of the trustees for the library. All right. Everybody's made a good point. These guys here know what we're going to hit. All right. The schools can get by. The police can get by. The libraries, really, it's not going to make it. We have money. I can't spend it all because it's in trusts and things like that. But what's going to happen is volunteers. There's a lot of people who are friends of the library here, the trustees. They'll keep the library open. I'm going to lose my staff because they're going to be gone. They're not going to have jobs. Okay? My staff's gone, right? It's going to last maybe to January. Maybe to January.
It won't even last that long.
Yeah, that's right. I know. I'm an optimist, right? This is going to kill it.
I've been a trustee for a long time.
I know.
It won't last that long.
I started as a trustee a little after her to get ADA. And the trustees have been smart enough to realize that this town can't afford the $2.5 million to give us real bathrooms, an access into the building, you know, and it's ADA, but have you ever watched a woman go in that library with a wheelchair? Not a wheelchair, a carriage, right? It's awful. It's a beautiful building, and it's prime time downtown. I'm a landscaper. It's the best spot in town. We're going to board it up, so that'll be another building boarded up in downtown Douglas. This doesn't pass, that's where it's going to go. It's going to be boarded up. I got my trustees don't want to hear me say that because I know they want to keep going. They love the library, right? I do too. But that's what's going to happen. We're going to have another vacant building. But maybe you were talking about a place to sell marijuana. Maybe that's a store that opens. Another pizza place. We could possibly have another pizza place in town.
Or a combination. Can't do it.
Right?
Can't do it.
Bones and bugs.
Bones and bugs. There you go. And that's on the lighter side. Right? Our town is going to start becoming a ghost town. All right? And I'm not talking to them. I'm supposed to be, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I'm talking to us, right? We've got to tell 5 of our friends to vote yes, all right? Just, you know, and we tell 5 more and 5 more. If we don't have this, this is a change on the downtown appearance of Douglas, right? The schools, these guys have had a tough series. I know, it's been a tough years. They pull it out. They're very good. They cut and throw everything out away and they start again. They can survive this. They have to. The police department, right? I came in this town in 1981, right? They barely had that one officer, okay? We have a great system, right? The library gone is going to be a hole in the center of town, right? And we've been getting by because we've been skirting the laws with ADA. Okay? And we can continue to that. Justin didn't say that he was going after a grant, that if we keep it open, we may be able to induce some of those improvements. It's not everything, right? We just got a parking lot, right? It's been, I don't know how many years. Everybody had a park on the street.
20 years.
Yeah, we just got a parking lot, right? By the way, that was by the DPW, our boys to put that in. All right, a donation from Pine, all right? This is a critical vote for the library, because we're done, all right? We'll try to keep it open, you know, as much as we can. But you still got to pay for lights, this, and there's no new books coming in. So after a while, the reasons that we're keeping it open will be mute, right? So think about that. Think about what this town's going to look like for the new people that are coming in. Oh, there's no library in Douglas. What's that about, right? So if I can ask everybody, tell 5 friends and get them to tell 5 friends and vote yes, please, right? Thank you. Thanks for your time.
I'd just like to go back to
to the senior center again and follow up what the administrator said about it's not just a bingo hall, that we do have nurse come in, podiatrist. We have exercise 3 times a week, which I go to. And my doctor told me if I wasn't going to that, I'd be using a walker. And there's 2 other exercises as well going on. We have the police department come down and speak to us. We have the fire department comes down and speak to us. We have
I know that during election
nutrition comes
seasons, you've always got the selectmen coming through, because we don't see you vote. You guys always vote.
So it's just, I just want to get through that. It's just not a bingo senior center, you know, that people to come in and see, like the Sunshine Club, Pam, they raised $6,000 for we to get an air conditioner. It was more than that, 8,000. That we didn't ask the town for anything. And the Sunshine raised that money, so this year it's put in. We need a floor. We can't get that. We need a refrigerator. These things that seem very little, but mean a lot to us. And seniors always seem to get at the back of the line. And that's sad because we don't graduate, that's our school. We don't have a cap and gown. Our cap and gown is, to put it bluntly, a family picking out a nice dress or outfit for families to come and look at us. That's where we're coming from. It's supposed to be our golden years to have a senior center. We don't have sprinklers. We have an out-of-date defibrillator, even though it works.
And you're under the post office, it's noisy as hell in there.
And sure is. More so than little, you know, so it's just not for bingo.
I understand.
And we have a special art, I think Pam's in charge of. It's unbelievable the work that is being done with that, you know. It's just, pharmacy comes in, you know, to make sure that we're taking the right stuff that we're supposed to be taking with our medicine, you know. I can't say enough that we go without, we're not complaining, because we're thankful also that we have something, but we'd also like to have some more stuff.
I think it's the nature of your whole generation. Is like, you remind me a lot of my dad and my grandparents, and like my grandmother, like a stoic New England Irish grandmother that you could cut her arm off and she'd be like, "Oh, I'm fine." So, and I can say that, and Matt can attest to it when we talk through the budget, is I said I don't want to touch the senior center, is that I don't ever like taking anything away from seniors, because you have fixed incomes and there's so little that overall the government and society does for seniors as it is. You know, having had the privilege and opportunity to have traveled overseas, like I find it almost despicable the way that the United States treats its seniors. I know, like, if you go to Japan, there's no such thing as a nursing home. It was a family took the parents in, they took care of them, and it was an honor, because when you've achieved that age, there's supposed to be great wisdom, and I hope that one day be wise. Right now, it's just not happening. But none of these choices are things that any of us feel good about. You know, I mean, it's miserable to have to sit down and be elected to sit in these positions and have to go back to your town and say, hey, you know, we're trying to represent you the best that we can, but the revenue won't allow us to give you all the services that you want, need, and deserve. You know, it's my personal sincerest hope that the override passes through, so I don't have to make any more decisions like this. You know, I mean, in the course of my professional career, I've gone through bad economic times, layoffs, you know, reductions in force, and none of them have been pleasant. And this budget season, by far, has been the single worst thing that I've dealt with. It kept me awake at night. It'll continue to keep me awake at night.
And just think, I do this for the privilege of $300 a year. Lucky me. So.
But we thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Is it true that the library cannot be reused for anything else?
That's my understanding.
It's deeded only for a library?
For use as a public library, yes.
It can't be used for any other?
That's the way the gift was stipulated when it was given to the town from the Fairfield family.
Did you have a question, sir? I'd like to, just because I know that you've asked, somebody new, it's always nice.
Yeah, Chris Bilodeau, 175 Main.
Hello, Chris.
How you doing, Kevin? You know, it's funny, I was prepared to come here and say all sorts of things about, you know, why I want to vote yes and for, you know, money and all that, but just listening to the fact of, you know, I'm blessed to live in a house that people congregate on Memorial Day for the first time I experienced on my property, and you know, seeing a library close and boarded up, and seeing people, you know, not maybe coming to my my yard, and I moved to this town for that reason, and you know, I can't even imagine. You know, my day job is a nurse practitioner, and I can't imagine just not taking care of seniors. I can't imagine of that closing. I can't imagine of seniors sitting in a house with no power, and I'm lucky enough to have a generator, and they don't. And we're just gonna. And I know it's not fair to tell people $450 is, you know, not a lot of money. I mean, I made some stupid comment on Facebook about standing there with, you know, at the Dunkin' Donuts on my vacation and telling people if you're buying coffee, you can afford the override. You know, it reaches a certain point where we have to start looking around in the community and say, do we want to live in a town where people just don't want to go? I mean, what's the point? I mean, we want to live in a town where people have a senior center, a library. All we can save $450. If I had the money, I mean, if I'd like to save the town, but I can't. Nobody can. We have to do it together, and that's all I got to say. I mean, I was moved by the trustee guy of the library. He left, but I just wish that people would look around and say, you know, what can we do to make this town a town? And that's all I got to say. I mean,
Not just a town, a community.
I'm gonna kill it. I think a good chunk to expand off there, Chris, is what we need to do is it's not just being a town, it's being a community. You know, and I kind of roll back to where I opened the meeting on is I'm proud to serve this community. I was privileged and blessed to have earned the confidence of enough people to be able to sit in the seat that I'm sitting in. That I had the trust of enough people in the community to say that, you know, you feel okay about the direction that you're trying to steer our community in. But on the flip side, I've lived through, this is our third attempt at an override, and the level of just absolute ugliness that people are showing to one another on social media, it's shameful. You know, I'd seen one comment that had shown up that it was like, hey, we were at a cookout the other day, and now that you found out that I'm voting yes or no, you know, now I'm a second-class citizen. And, you know, comments of people that are sitting in elected positions that, you know, people feel that they're being browbeat by myself or anyone that sits in these positions of trying to force you to go yes or no. That's not how a community works. You know, there's people here that are lucky enough to be able to have some extra dollars or extra time or extra whatever it is to invest back into the community itself, and there's those that just don't. And I think that part of just being a decent human being is accepting the fact that there's differences and allowing them to make the decisions that best suit their family. I know I look over what's best for the town, but I'm personally voting yes. I'm lucky. I have a good job. I make a good living. I'm able to take care of my family, but I know that's not the case with everyone. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and make anybody that legitimately can't afford an additional money in a tax levy feel bad about voting no because they're taking care of their family first. So, you know, it's one of those things. It's family first, it's community second, country third, and that's kind of how you roll down through them, at least in my simple little Irish mind. But I'm hoping that after tonight's meeting that when I look at Dynamic Douglas, I don't want to all of a sudden just block the site and feel ashamed again. I think that we're all genuinely good people in this town. I think that this, multiple times I've seen the community come together and do what needs to get done. And to expand on it, we have a fantastic police department, which is definitely, for two guys that are on the road all the time, I deal with a lot of my Comcast techs and things like that that travel through, the impression that people get is that Douglas has cops everywhere. Because you can't manage to get them down without getting pulled over if you're going.
Just keep that illusion going.
Absolutely. You know, it was a great thing to sit here as an elected official and have two people sitting in this town that are still here because we had the foresight to take our ambulance service and turn it into 24 hours. And I mean, those are the kind of meetings that we all signed up to do. And I'll be honest, Kent's run on a very shoestring budget and has been able to offer genuinely top-notch service to just about anybody in town that's ever needed an ambulance or a fire truck. You know, Mr. Maines, it's working on the school district that makes cuts, make cuts, but is still a product of its own, you know, basically you're a victim of your own success. To where the image is the school's got all kinds of money, which is what brought me to where I'd open with this. You know, every single one of the department heads that sits in this town is probably some of the most dedicated individuals that you will ever see in your lifetime. I work for a Fortune 5 company, and I would literally kill to have any one of them on my staff. Because the amount of hours and the amount of dedication and the amount of caring that they give to this community, you can't put a price tag on that. You just can't. And you can't reproduce it anywhere else. So, you know, I joke with Jean about every dollar has a story, but I can go home and tell you that it's genuinely true, and that she'll come into work sick. We used to have to harass her to go on vacation because the level of dedication that she has to make sure that we're able to present a balanced budget. Mr. Wojcik, that's new to town, you know, has instantly embraced the overall Douglas philosophy of we're going to do whatever it takes to manage to keep the lights on, the doors open, and the services provided to the people that put us here. And I think that those are the types of things that you think about when it comes time to, do I vote yes or no? Do I reinvest in a community that's been able to provide to you the things that you need and do it at personal sacrifice and at limited budget dollars to make sure that this town is safe, that the lights are on, that the streets are plowed, that the budget's balanced, and that we're able to continue to worry about everything outside of what's happening in Douglas? I think that's where you make your emotional-based decision on how to vote on this. But again, it's family first, it's your community second, and then last of all, it's for you to love your own country. And that's where you start looking at that level. But that's all I got. Go ahead.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I heard that there are ways for the seniors to get reductions in their taxes or certain things, and I was wondering if you could talk about some of those so more people are aware. And also, my second question is there something to do where they can volunteer or have less taxes? Is it possible for someone else to volunteer in their place to lower their taxes?
I'm the senior center director, so I will take that one. I don't have the.
Can your microphone, Patrice?
Oh, yes.
I'm not loud enough.
Facebook. Can she make sure that you hear this on Facebook?
Those will pick up.
Okay.
Because this is important.
Okay, so I'm the Senior Center Director, Patrice Russo, and I can answer some of that. The assessor is more equipped to answer the multiple programs that they would have. They do come down to the Senior Center, they do talk about them. The tax work-off program is great, but if you're 96 years old, you can't really do it.
That's why I'm asking
Yes.
if people can volunteer.
So they can volunteer for the positions, just depends on your health, your physical agility, your ability to be able to do something that's repetitive, or maybe gardening or painting. I mean, there's many jobs within the town, not for every senior. Also, there is a cap on it.
I think her question is that can a much younger person walk in and volunteer those hours for the senior?
That's what I want to know. I also wanted to, on the Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I also wanted people watching from home, because I assume few of them may be seniors, to also let them know the programs that can help them.
So, Christine, what do you?
Can I go volunteer
I don't know.
For
No,
senior to
it has to be physically the person. I believe so too. There is a couple other tax reduction things that they do based on your income, and the assessor's office does that. Some people don't want to do that because some of your things are going to be public knowledge now. So it's kind of voted on with some of those tax programs. So if I wanted to go in and get a reduction in my taxes, then a board is going to have to sit and see if I qualify, and other people might know your business. So even if somebody wanted to do that program, some of them just don't want to do it because they don't want anybody knowing their things. So, but there is about 6 programs.
Is there any, I don't know if it's through the state, is there any way to change that, to let people volunteer for them to get help?
Ooh, have to change the state law.
It is a state law. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was state or town.
It is a state law, yeah.
Okay.
But what about both?
My understanding was you could volunteer and provide those hours to the senior. Mike is in the form of that administrator.
Can someone find that out for sure?
Yeah, I've never had anybody do it. I don't, yeah. I've never had anybody even ask the question, so that's why I'm.
I think it's a good thing.
And you keep in mind that we also have a cap on the amount of.
Right, but every little bit helps.
Right, but the amount of money that's in that program, and it's a certain amount of hours. So if the program is capped at like $10,000 or $12,000, we have 1,734 seniors in town. Do you know what I mean? So
But
that could.
I'm assuming.
No, but I think that's a very
that
positive.
Not every single one of them has, really needs that, but I'm saying the people who really, this is going to break them, this tax hike.
Unfortunately, the problem too is not having enough housing. We only have apartments for 30 seniors in town, and then some that are on a sliding scale, maybe over at Haywood Landing. A lot of these seniors have their own homes. So it's not like they could have sold their house and moved in for an apartment when they became a widow, or if they wanted to stay in town and age in town, then, they're kind of stuck here paying for a lot of things, on a very, very limited income. A lot of the seniors in this town are older, and a lot of them worked at the mills and depend just on Social Security. They don't have an IRA. They don't have any kind of retirement fund. And if they've lived long enough, pretty much Social Security is what they've got. And unfortunately, the state cuts services for them too. Like you said, Medicare Part B, Medicare Part A, donut holes, prescriptions, everything's gone up for them also. So it is a really fine line. So, but yep. But I would like to thank Matt for his kind words. We are definitely a human services department. So for every person, like Rita had spoken, that's able to come to the senior center and not be a depressed senior that's sitting in their home, or somebody who's becoming very frail because they're able to exercise and they have the proper nutrition and the proper education to be their age. I hope that the senior center can actually stay open, but I do understand the constraints on people that are in town trying to make the decision whether they can afford the tax hike. So, but I will definitely check into that. And we have an informational meeting at the senior center with Matt and Jean on Thursday for the seniors that weren't able to come out at night or just couldn't get here. And they're going to explain everything to them at that time. So I will make sure that I have that information for them available. And I think that's a great idea if we can do it. Yes.
Give a shout out to that you guys take volunteers to help at the senior center too.
Oh yes, we'll take volunteers anytime. Yes. Does anybody else have any questions?
All right. So I know it's getting late, and I know those chairs are not comfortable.
I could remind everybody that the informational flyer from the Finance Committee is going to be mailed out to every single household, and you should be getting that before town meeting. Town meeting is May 7th, and the election is May 8th. Both important dates. If anybody has any questions on any of the information here, you can contact my office for sure. Selectmen's office. We're able to answer questions on the warrant articles. If you have anything specific, or if you come up with any questions or additional follow-up questions after tonight, please contact us. And, we can try to help you through some of the questions that you have. We want the information to get out there so people can make an informed decision. And I'd rather have you ask the question of someone that may have, intimate knowledge of it than ask somebody who may not.
Make sure everyone comes to town meeting as well as voting. That's the first step you're going to navigate. And like I say, anybody at home that's concerned about living on a fixed income. The board is very sympathetic to that, but we ask that you take a look at, your long-term financial advantages of passing this and the quality of life in Douglas and how it's going to be impacted if we have a closed library and the school system starts to founder.
And the senior center's gone.
And the senior center's gone as well.
Gone. If you think this meeting was fun, town meeting is just action-packed. Yeah, just that. So, thank you to everybody that did come up, those that spoke, those that had questions, those that didn't. I'm always available, so is the rest of the board, if there's any questions. Our email addresses are published on the website. I'm usually lurking on Dynamic Douglas because I do love a good argument here and there.
That's the Irish in you.
It could be. But again, thank you.
Question, please.
Yes.
Why do you insist on bundling? Why can't you let the citizens make the decision?
Because
whether the library or the senior center or the schools.
Because it's not about a single department at this point.
Well, you're closing the library. That's the department.
But if you look at the overall strategy behind the override, it's designed to stop having a heavy reduction on free cash into your operating budget. It really isn't a good model. It hasn't worked for the town in eons.
But it's going to affect the library.
It's going to affect the library this year if it doesn't pass. It's going to affect the schools next year and the senior center if it doesn't pass. And when we go through, and I'm just going to be honest, and I'm sorry if it comes across as confrontational. If it fails through and people say if you were asking for 800,000 as opposed to 1.5, or if they say you were asking for an override for the library but not for the whole town, it's a cop-out. You were going to vote no anyway. That's the truth.
The library and the senior center is the only thing in town for the seniors.
I completely understand that. But again, it's, when you start looking at it, we do an override for the library. It solves 1 year. That $200,000 that we've allocated for the library is now part of the levy next year. Guess what we're talking about doing next year? Closing the libraries. Because the revenue is the problem. It's not just the library, or next year we're looking at closing the senior center. So we do an override for the senior center for $73,000. Well, you stay open another year. But then the $73,000 is part of the levy. And now we're closing it again the next year because the overall problem hasn't been addressed. We haven't done something to address the revenue base, period. So I, for one, sitting on the board for 5 years, and I'm perfectly happy if somebody runs against me, beats me, and I can stay home on Tuesday nights. It comes through and says, we're perfectly content to come in every year and ask for another 200,000 and another 200,000 and another 200,000. That's perfectly great. I don't believe in Band-Aid solutions and small ones. I looked at a 5-year plan. I looked at the opportunity to give this board and the Economic Development Committee and FinCom a little bit of breathing room so we can actually start addressing the long-term problems, which is we don't have a diversified tax base. We're extremely dependent on state aid in order for us to get by. The real thing is that our levy was too low when Prop 2.5 got introduced and then limited our growth to 2.5% per year, but it didn't keep pace with the population explosion. You know, the health insurance costs getting out of control. Thanks, Obama. You know, I mean, we can go down to the list forever. We have to find strategic ways to cut things back and not do small nickel and dime solutions towards it. I get it. $1.5 million, it's a ton of money. It's a lot to ask for anybody. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, would you rather put a plan in place that can buy us 5 years if we continue to do what we've already proven in a track record that we're good at doing? We're not going to add any additional headcount. We're going to free up free cash and actually start investing that back into our community through capital projects. We're going to look to diversify the tax base. And we can actually try and control healthcare costs. Look into alternate means of revenue where it be, maybe we do buy vans. But a small little a la carte based override, it would have never passed. I can almost promise you it would have never passed. Because you'd have some people that say, yeah, I'm going to vote for $200,000 for the library, but I'm not happy with the school, so I'm not going to vote for that. None of them would have had enough support individualized on an a la carte basis to have ever made it through the ballot. I just don't see it happening. Because we've tried too many times. I couldn't get a pumper rescue truck and a culvert cleaner through a debt exclusion article through the town.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to be confrontational, and I understand and appreciate where you're at, but if you ask why do you bundle it, I work for Comcast. We bundle everything.
I hate it. It's like the field we're paying for. The school field, $2 million.
The what?
The field. That got bundled with the school.
$2 million per field?
Yeah.
The athletic field was $2 million?
Oh, was it?
1.5, what? What was it?
We came in under budget for our school, for the school building.
The field.
The whole project was under budget.
The field.
The field was not $2 million.
Was $1.5 million. It was up there.
I'll let you guys do that on
Okay. So no raises for 5 years?
No raises. No raise, no, not zero raises. No head count. We're not adding anybody on the municipal side for 5 years. No head count.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for attending.